Heavenly Father, we just thank you for giving us this day. Thank you for watching over your children and providing for us. Thank you for your Ruach HaKodesh in guiding us, directing us, surrounding us, and protecting us. Heavenly Father, we just ask that you keep your eyes upon the land, your land, because there seems to be a lot of destruction, and we praise you for watching over your children and keeping us in your cup and making certain that none of us are harmed. All we have is you, Yah. So we give you great praise in watching over us and keeping us. Abba, we ask that your word is enlightened on our heart today as we bow before you to learn your ways and learn all that you want to share with us. Thank you for your intimacy. Thank you for your blessing of helping us to understand your great language so that we could be a cod with you. Abba, thank you so much for all that you are and all that you do. LYHUH LYHUH. Amen.
Amen. This is part 7 of the GABOR LYHUH notion, frame of mind, concept, train of thought. I'm going to reiterate and pick up where left off last week. The affirmations, you might say, object or focus of meditation. So the concept of the Aleph Tav as a singularity is just a package deal, you might say, of labeled Aleph and Tav, like covers of a book. Well, what's inside? So if Aleph and Tav are like the book covers, well, it's the other 20 letters. But it's not exclusive of the Aleph and Tav, because knowing what Aleph means and Tav means is that, well, that's part of it, but the body, the pulp, the meat of what's in there. See, the word basar, bet shin resh, is translated good news or gospel or flesh. The flesh of a piece of fruit is the part you eat, the substance of it. The word eat or food or meal in Hebrew is aleph kaf lamed, akal or akala, if you give the a vowel phonetic to each letter, akala. But if you look at the structure of the word, kaf lamed, kal or kala, it literally means all, every, each, any. So if you say every man, kal, kaf lamed, aleph yod shin, kal ish, does it mean any man or every man or each man or all men? In Hebrew, it means all that. It means any one of those things you want to think of. So when I'm, you might say, analyzing a text, I write down all those words, not just one of them. I don't just write the word all or every or each, because somehow when I'm trying to look at what this verse is saying, I want to be able to easily grab any one of those ideas and plug it into whatever frame of mind the next word and the next word wants to pull on. So, as I've said before, the idea, the notion of each letter, well, that's a single letter, but it's a package. The letter, each individual letter is a package. But then as it finds itself within the packaging of Aleph Tav, it's, what comes to mind is back in grammar school where you're saying, okay, you're doing, forget what they call it, where you have a Roman numeral 1 and you have something, you have subset A, subset lowercase, maybe numbers, and then you have Roman numeral 2, and then it's how to organize something. Well, you could say that that's the way the alphabet works. So you've got the Aleph Tav. What is that? So we did that whole series on Sephiring Aleph Tav. So if you mention Aleph Tav, well, is it just those two letters? Is it the word that is hyphenated that means if or with? Or is it pointing a grammatical device that points to the noun that the verb action is upon? Well, yeah, it's that. But then this Aleph Tav is also its own thing. And you could say, well, if Aleph Tav refers to the complete notion, the totality of intention, whose intention? When? Well, the creator's heart of intention, what he was going to do, what he wanted to do, hoped to accomplish by inventing, making the universe, the earth, Adam on the earth. What was the reason for all that? To point at Aleph Tav and say, well, it's right there. All that's what's in Aleph Tav. So every time you see the Aleph Tav, you're, you might say, invoking from deep within. You're grabbing at the root. You're touching the root. The micro beginning all the way through to the full stature of the, as it were, the root becoming a tree bearing fruit. In its, the word ador, Aleph, Dalet, Resh, speaks of, you might say, think of a citrus tree with vibrant, yellow or orange fruit, orange tree, lemon tree, in its full stage of production. In other words, it's gone through all of its life cycles and numerous times, and so now it's a full tree, and now it's just loaded with great fruit, with seeds in it. That's the stage of Adar. So there's the month of Adar, which would be the 12th month in Hebrew, or in, you might say, the Jewish thought, Israeli thought, the month of Adar. And then if that's the 12th month, just so people know, I'm just throwing out some ideas here, just in case you ever hear them, you go, oh, that's what that's talking about. Well, that would be December, right? When it's, gosh, when it's freezing cold, we're buried in the snow. What's so glorious about that? Wrong calendar. That's what's so glorious about that. You see, if the springtime, the gateway to the warm blue sky, sunshine, flowers, if that's Abib or Aviv, Aleph, Bet, Yod, Bet, if that's the first month, well, if a year has 12 months, maybe it has 13. The 12th month would be Adar. So if we think of, well, when springtime happens, that month, that moon, right at the equinox, depending on when you want to calculate the calendar, which gets into a whole nother discrepancy problem. But if that's Aviv, then the month right before that, the last month of the year, is Adar. Well, that would say right around March, when it's actually right before the equinox, the last month right before the equinox. So winter is past. Winter has yielded to a change. The flowers, the buds, the springtime, the word spring meaning Aleph, Bet, or Aleph, Bet, Yod, Bet. Well, that's a derivative of Aleph, Bet, which is father. But Aleph, Bet is also verdure, this inner vigorous vitality to express the desire for life, for the father to have a family, or for somebody to say, boy, I have this dream of a company, of a production, of a piece of art, a piece of music, and to have that within you percolating, becoming, and then expressing Well, that's Aleph Bet becoming Aleph Bet Bet or Aleph Bet Yod Bet. So what I'm saying is that if you look in the dictionary and it's like, well, if the word Aleph Bet is father, but Aleph Bet is also youthful, verdure, vigor, vitality, enthralled living of life. Well, is it the father or is it the child? It's neither, it's both. It's the attitude, what's within you. So if that's actually this Alephness, to say, this is me having a present conscious experience, but the experience isn't just self-reflection of, I think, therefore I am, like Rene Descartes, French philosopher. I think, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum. Well, I think, therefore I am. That he was analyzing the question, how can you prove, or how do you know for sure, how do you prove that you exist? Well, I'm thinking. That was at the conclusion of numerous other ventures, exploits into trains of thought that failed to prove that he existed. Well, I have a sensation in my leg. Well, people have what they call phantom pain. If they have an amputation, they can still feel their leg because they're not feeling their leg, but the pathways of nerves from that leg, which is no longer there, going into the brain, is registering as if it's there because it's a pathway blazed into neural synapses. And that just doesn't go away, even though there's no longer a leg, because things exist at their location, but then the pathway between their location and the perceiver, that you might say the assimilator, the brain, between the leg and the brain, well, that's this gimbal. So if you have the brain as the aleph, the leg as the bet, there's this gimbal pathway of nerves, and even if the bet disappears, the gimbal is still there because it's not been carved, but it's in a way like if you have a thick forest and it's like there's no way through. Well, the easiest way through is to find an animal trail where the animals have deer trail, rabbit trail, and then you take your machete, a tool, and hack away some brush to make a bigger trail, and you walk on it and you kick aside the rocks, and then but that when you have certain thoughts, science has determined that's what you're doing. And so I've heard it said, someone was giving a TED talk about this very matter, that if you think about a subject for 20 minutes, and they've determined that 20 minutes is your basic, you might say, required minimum amount of time to stay your mind on a certain subject for 20 minutes, and it blazes this trail, forms bridges, connectors, certain neurons will start firing in sequence order, and it becomes a fixture. So too, I think it's if you stop thinking certain thoughts for like 7 years or something, all those structures are dismantled, removed. After 7 years, if you pick up those thoughts again, you might say, oh, hey, this is familiar, but it's like finding ruins in a remote place. It's like, boy, somebody lived here before. Look at, there's stones piled on top of each other. They no longer form a wall or a house, but obviously someone had dwelt here once upon a time. They're relics suggesting somebody that was very familiar and that did it all the time, but now we just see evidences, traces. So too, if your mind thinks a certain way, and you're there for more than 20 minutes, maybe a few years, maybe some period of time in your life, and then you change your thoughts, change your way, become a believer, become a proselyte of a different philosophy, religion, political view, a different relationship with another person in your life. what the brain does physiologically, the neurons start building new pathways. So, for example, if you wanted to learn, say, to play tennis, and you say, well, I don't know how to hold the racket. Well, you're supposed to hold it with your hand in a certain position very intentionally. If you allow yourself to just grab the tennis racket and hit the ball, and hey, it's not going where I want it to, well, that's because you have to adjust where your hand is and how you're holding the grip. If you allow yourself the convenience of not being particular about that, your brain's going to learn how to hold that tennis racket in the wrong way, and you'll forever not hit it right. But if you force yourself to think, I'm going to hold the tennis racket in exactly the proper way. I'm not going to give myself any leniency, any convenience of, well, I'm new at this, I'll let it slip, I'll not force myself. You're going to learn wrong, and then now you're going to have to unbuild what your brain has just built, because your brain doesn't know, it's just doing what you're telling it to do. Hold it like this, okay, and it'll establish the neural pathways with wrong processes, wrong procedural relays. But if you force yourself to say, I will only hold the tennis racket in the right way, okay, then your brain learns that. Then you say, well, I can't hit it with much strength, very hard with, or I can't aim. Well, that has to be learned. But step by step, hold the tennis racket in a certain way. It's so if you're learning to play the guitar, the piano, start at the very beginning and hold your hands and place your fingers on the strings of the keys exactly where they go. And even if it's slowly, force yourself to go in just the right place, and then you can practice technique, speeding up, rhythm, meter, that whole thing. That's just the way we're built. Elohim built the brain, and I'm saying the brain is a physiological structure. The mind then is the consciousness within the operational procedures of the brain. And so for a guy like Rene Descartes to say, I think, therefore I am, he was noticing himself cogitating. And he says, I'm cogitating with intention. I'm not just having a nerve behavior, or I'm not just robotically, as it were, going through a program of behavior, because I might be a robot, but the fact that I'm cogitating is this unique thing that and then there was quite a bit of analysis, him talking all around this subject as to establish it as this proof. So for him to come to the conclusion, I think, I am thinking, I am cogitating, that's the substance of the proof that I actually exist. So the reason I'm going on about him is because it was a whole treatise. It was a couple hundred pages, I think, of him writing in a book, and you take that as a whole class at school to contemplate and discuss and see what's in that. But for Yahuwah to say, Ehyeh, spelled Aleph He Yod He, I am, I exist. Stretched out a little more, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I am that I am. What does that even mean? I am that I am. That's the English, King James. Other people have translated that I will be whatever I will be, or I will be that I will be, or I will be what I will be. I will be who I will be. See that word asher, aleph shin resh, is typically translated who that, or who that, whoever that. So when you say Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, Asher, aleph shin resh, well, if you know the structure of the language, aleph as a prefix letter, but it may not be a prefix letter. It might be the three-letter word asher. But I'm saying if you know the structure of the language, you can say, I know that aleph is also can be used as a prefix letter. And then I could say, well, yashar, yod shin resh, is also a three-letter word. Very similar in meaning. Yashar, the first three letters of the word Israel, yashar el, yod shin resh, aleph lamed. But yod is a prefix letter, is third person, he will, kind of a future reference. So aleph is a prefix letter, is first person, I will, or I am. So it's either present tense or the present aleph bet, abib concept, I'm going to do this thing. So as I'm analyzing with understanding each letter, not just aleph is an ox. Aleph, the closest I've been able to pull in all the possible notions and reduce it down to a minimum is aleph is self-referential of identity and intent. I didn't read that somewhere. It's just that I see that in use. So if you go online and say, what does aleph mean? Ox head. Aleph is modern Hebrew is drawn as a big line and two little lines. Well, hey, that's similar to the basic elements of a vav and two yods. What do you mean the basic elements? Well, in geometry, you have a point, and then between any 2 points, whether the 2 points are next to each other or the other point's way far away, that which connects any 2 points is a line. So the simplest elements of geometry is a point, a line, and then if you make a third point, now you've got a plane, a surface area between the 3 points. And then if you raise up into another dimension, now you've got three-dimensional, so you can form a spatial object, but that's just basic geometry. But between any 2 points is a line, and then lines exaggerated, exploited, you might say, form other geometric structures. Well, so that's what I'm saying. If he says ehye, I am, how would you draw a picture of that? It's the point. It's either there or it's not there. It is there. The simplest, reduced graphic of isness, existence, is the dot. Okay. Well, then what's a share? If you've got a dot at ehye and you've got another dot, a share is the line between the two dots. So graphically, dot, line, dot is ehye, asher, ehye. But asher means who that, or who that which. W-H-I-C-H. Yeah, but see, asher means something more. If you look in Psalms 1, it says ashri, aleph shin resh yod. Well, the yod makes it possessive. Personally, this is mine. Ashri. But it's translated praiseworthy or happy or blessed. Ashri ha'ish, blessed is the man, or praiseworthy is the man. But see, asher, it's never translated as praiseworthy. It's translated who, that, which. But if you look in the dictionary, you'll see that it's also true, valid, authentic, affirmed, validated. You could then enlarge that and say, well, read a thesaurus. It's actual. It's the thing that really does exist. So then you could say, well, what comes to my mind is what are synonyms of that word, but what's then opposite that word? And what's opposite of that word in Hebrew happens to be shin vav aleph, or nun bet lamed, Nabal, or where you get Babel, bet lamed. So the bet lamedness, if you get bet lamed vav nun, we get balloon. Well, what's a balloon? Well, it's filled with air. There's nothing inside there. Well, air is something. It's not nothing, but it's essentially a big puff of nothingness. Bet lamed. Nabal. Remember, David was working to protect the guy's interest, and then he was going to kill the guy, and his wife Abigail came out and gave a feast to David and his men and said, My husband's name is Nabal, which means fool, and certainly fool he is. It's like living up to his name, Nabal, Nun Bet Lamed, Babel, confusion, and things being distorted. Shin Vav Aleph, Shua. Yahweh says in one of the 10 Commandments, one of the first ones, don't lift up his name unto vanity. Well, that word vanity, emptiness, bring it to nothing, is Shin Vav Aleph. Just so you know, there was a fellow in New Zealand, I think it was, who said, wait a minute, if you say the word Yeshua, as in Mashiach, Yeshua, and you spell his name S-H-U-A, or Yah, Y-A-H, S-H-U-A, that's Shin Vav Aleph, and you're bringing his name to nothing. That's a corruption. That's blasphemy. I'm not going to do it. And it's like, see, this is the problem when you have to wrap your mind around the subject. If the Aleph is the English letter A, then Shua, S-H-U-A, kind of lines up with Shin Vav Aleph, which is nothingness and to make void, which is a sacrilege. So you can't name him Yeshua. But the problem is his name is Yah, Yod Vav, Shin Ayin. Well, the ayin is not the letter A. It's pronounced as an A. It's in the place of the English letter O. So I will write it Y-H-U, Yod Vav, S-H-O, because the O is the ayin. Yod Vav Shin Ayin. But then we read it in English and we give it a phonetic sound. It's Yahusho? What do you mean Yahusho? His name was, I thought, was Yeshua. See, if somebody is just stepping into all this stuff and they go, how does this work? Well, let me tell you the difference between Yeshua and Yeshuo. And it's like, everything's distorted. Everything's suddenly blown out because it's too much too soon. They don't need to know. They don't want to know. Their mind goes, what the heck are you talking about? But for the sake of accuracy, if I pronounce it, I'm going to pronounce the ayin as an A sound. So I'll write the letter A. But then am I writing it for phonics or am I writing it for letter placement of English equivalents, which is literary, transliteration, writing in English that which was supposed to be written in Hebrew. And if somebody's not willing to tackle that, you might say scholastic detail, they're going to be confused. So then where do you back off and say, the objective isn't confusion and isn't we're going to nitpick the details and hammer them in so that everybody is afraid to even address the subject. Where do you make it simple enough to attract the attention of a child or a child's mind or someone who is a total novice and doesn't know anything, doesn't know that they should care? What's the word asher? Aleph Shin Resh. True, valid, authentic. Whoever wants to be praiseworthy, blessed, happy, that's asher stuff. Well, that's the straight line between this dot and that dot. Simple, direct, smooth, matter of fact. And for Yahuwah to say he's referencing himself is Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. Dot, line, dot. Tell them Ehyeh sent you. That's in Exodus 3 at Burning Bush. That's when Moshe said, when I go back and say I've had this bizarro encounter with this talking burning bush, the voice, the one, who shall I say sent me? Because they're going to say, what's his name? Who is this that you were talking to? Because the Egyptians had all this reference of these various deities, and frankly, the Israelites, the Hebrews, have totally lost track of Yahuwah by that time. And they were just, their minds were wrapped up and absorbed and completely entangled. Like here in Oregon, they got these blackberries. Gosh, man, those things can be 20 feet tall or more, thick, intertangled, thorns go in all different directions. the roots will be here, then it'll throw out a branch, and where it touches the ground, it'll put more roots, and then it touches the ground, more roots. You can't just, here's the branches, here's the stalk, pull out the stalk. It's rooted in all these different places, and it's like I've tried to look for numerous various tools over the years to be easier way to cut through those things. A whole list of various tools, and it's like the bottom line, there is no easy way to cut through those things. Bulldozer, that's about an excavator, that's the easiest way. How do you get rid of the entanglements? How do you get rid of those thorn bushes? It's a struggle, it's an issue. But to get rid of those thorn bushes so that you can get down to just bare soil. Well, for Yahweh to say, tell them Yahweh sent you, or Yahovah, or Yahweh, or Jehovah. That's not what he said. He said, tell them Ehyeh sent you. Dot. Tell them the great singularity, the dot, sent you. Huh? Can you elaborate? Yes. Dot line dot. That's the one I was talking to. But see, we never hear anybody talk like that. But that's what he said. So if the alephness concept is the dot, why didn't he just say aleph? Because aleph is spelled aleph lamed pei. Now you got to have a lamed and a pei, and you got to know what the letter lamed means and what the letter pei means in order to really understand what the word aleph means. And there's studies where that's what they do. And they say, well, lamed is spelled lamed mem dalet. So now you have to know what the mem means and the dalet means in order to know what the lamed means, in order to know what the aleph means. Same with the letter pei, spelled pei aleph. So, but you see, the interesting thing is no matter where you go in terms of engineering or reverse engineering or contemplating the alphabet, you're trapped in a container of the 22 letters. So if you were going to say, what does aleph mean? How do I diagnose the meaning of aleph? Well, aleph is spelled aleph lamed pei. Well, how's lamed spelled and pei spelled? It's all still a congruence, a conglomeration, a mixing, an entanglement of the 22 letters. And within the scope, the realm of the 22 letters, it never demands that something outside of that must be pulled in order to get a scope on what it is you're looking at. See, in a practical real life, you find yourself in the middle of a situation. It's like, what's going on here? Oh, I feel this, and oh, I see that, and oh, this thing is pressuring me here. And then people might say, well, how do you get outside the box in order to see what you're dealing with? So if you go to a counselor, or if you're going to, say if you're on a job site and you got a bunch of tradesmen, call the superintendent. He'll come in, and literally in Hebrew, the word for superintendent is the one who can see, the one who has a perspective. He didn't just hit his finger with the hammer. He's outside of the box, so he can see what's going on within the box. And so he can give guidance and counsel to those who are at the task within the project. So there's always, we have this notion, we, Adam, human beings on the face of the earth, engaged in various struggles, have the experience, which is everything. And if we can back away from the experience and, hey, take a break, have a cup of coffee, take a nap, and come back and look at it with fresh eyes, but we're still within the situation. And then the benefit of friends or other counsel is outside the box. And then those who have a hope in deity, God, religion, believe or know that there's one who has another perspective. Boy, if I could just gain that perspective from outside the container of this realm, then now I can get a clear view of what's really going on. But see, the interesting thing about the Aleph Bet is you never get outside the Aleph Bet. It's all inside the Aleph Bet. even the perspective of the deity view, the spirit view of what's going on is still contained within the Aleph Bet. It's a very interesting packaging. But then if you look back, jump back to Ehyeh, Aleph Hey Yod Hey, Aleph Hey, Yod Hey. Well, you have to know what Hey means and Yud means in order to know how the Aleph is working on that. So what it infers is that this dot of singular simplicity is not so simple because there's two other letters, which means that the rest of the letters had to exist in the full package scope of Aleph Tav, the 22 collective, in order to know what the Hey means and the Yod means and all the other letters, which means that the great mind of the Aleph, I am, I will, who had this yearning Aleph Bet betness, Aleph Bet Yod Bet desire, he had to first establish and give substance, give meaning to, give place for the full package of the 22 letters in order to even incorporate it into the simple identification of his being, his name, his essence, his place. Shem is not just name, it's place, renown, reputation. So to say that the name, where's he at, the place, the reputation, the occupation of all his concerns is Aleph Tav. That's the full package. That's the scope. That's the object and the environment and the view from outside the environment. It's all just contained within Aleph Tav. So when you write the word Aleph Tav, or the little monogram symbol that I use of the V shape, the Aleph cross and becoming Tav, that joining the Aleph to the Tav, is invoking that whole concept, which is everything. And in its simplicity, the singularity dot. So it's the one and the whole. It's the bullseye and the full scope. See, if you draw a dot with a circle, which is the shape of the letter ayin, that circle is a limiter. But the infiniteness of Aleph is, you can't draw a circle around it. It's woof, it's there's no containment. Well, that's the idea of the Ein Sof. A-I-N, that's where we get in English the word A-I-N-T, Aleph Yod Nun, ain't. There is no, and the word Sof or Suf means limit, doorway. And so the word Joseph, Yod Vav, Yo Samic Pei. Well, Samic Pei, you look in the dictionary, it means goblet or threshold or to accumulate. If you accumulate stuff into this place, that's like the dot inside the circle. That's like putting the bull inside the pen. So if you look at the shape of the letter ayin, which is a pupil inside an eye, it's the seed inside of the fruit. It's to put the bull inside the pen and keep him away from the rest of the herd. It's also then to say, I understand. That's the dot inside the realm of that which can be comprehended. That's the circle around it. See, what I'm trying to do is say, is an ayin an eyeball? Is it a picture of a fruit? Is it the understanding? Is it trapping a notion within this other zone? Well, if you understand what Aleph means within the scope of Aleph Tav, that's the dot within the circle. But if the circle is infinite, you can't draw a picture of that. Because as soon as you draw a picture, you've put a circle around and you've trapped it, which is the antithesis of the infinity. That's what bet is. So literally the picture of the ayin, the circle with the dot, is a good expression of bet. Bet is taking something and giving it a definition. What's the definition? Oh, it's the meaning inside the So the circle is the concept of, and the dot is the meaning that can be put into words. Well, that's bet. Bet is the objectification, the matter, the substance, the cosmos, as it were. To say there's a universe, so to say there's a material realm, a cosmos, well, yeah, but it's infinite. We just defined it. So now we've called it the big circle, and here's the planet Earth in the middle of the universe. Or if you have a flat Earth with a dome, we're within the dome. And so the dome and the flat Earth, or however you want to think of those things, well, that's the circle around, and our essence, our being, is the dot of the betness. But to even say Aleph can be identified, if the real Aleph is omnipotent, eternal, unfathomable, it's so vast you can't even, so to say Ein Sof without a door, without a threshold, without a limit, it's uncontainable. I mentioned before that someone got mad at me for even mentioning the word Ein Sof, because them Kabbalist Jews, man, they came up with that phrase, and it's not in scripture. And you'll see the word Aleph Yod Nun in scripture, and you'll see the word Sof as in the word Joseph, Suf, like sea of reeds. Suf is the word reed because it sucks up like a reed. It's like a straw. The word, we get the word sofa. It absorbs all the stuff out of your popcorn, out of your bowl, the coins out of your pockets, drop down into the cushion of the sofa. Remember these silly little things, and it helps you remember the language. Suf, sofa, finality. And someone might say, like the back wall, the back door. Well, what's on the other side of the back door? Well, if it's infinite, there is no back door. I'm just trying to say these are all these things. And so if you say, well, the word father, or the word for springtime, verter, I want to do this, that's Aleph Bet. I could say, well, the Aleph, if I could define Aleph, I could never draw a picture of it, because Aleph is infinite, eternal, omnipotent, omniscient. You can't contain the Aleph. So as soon as I think that I've contained Aleph and put it into a form, I've turned Aleph into a bet. I've talked about this before, but I'm saying it again for the sake of going through this train of thought, these affirmations, which I'll get to in just a moment here. But the idea that you could say, to take which can't be described and describe it and put it into the form of a dot, well, that's unencumbered with stuff. So the fact that he's so clever to say Ehyeh, boy, what a great concept. Just think about that. To take the infinite and give it a definition is to take that which can't be defined and put it into a graphic concept, which can be then our minds. Like if it's the dot, our mind is the circle, wrap it all around it. I'm going to figure this thing out. I'm going to think about this. I'm going to ponder this. How do you ponder that which can't be pondered? Give it a substance enough, not too confusing, simply a dot. Oh, a dot. How big is the dot? It's just a dot. It's either there or not there. It's there. Oh, how do you wrap your mind around the dot? We're like the electron. Our consciousness then is the electron spinning around the singular proton. What's that, the helium atom? One electron around almost a void of opposite polarity. Opposite polarity. Well, if you got electron and proton and what we write as nomenclature, negative, singular horizontal line, and then a plus sign, we think negative and positive. There's no negative nothing, and there's no positive nothing. It's just two indicators of two different states. And if you think of a sine wave, there's an up curve and a down curve. Well, one's an up curve and one's a down curve. Which one's good and bad? Neither. Which one's up or down? Neither, because there's no reference of north, south, east, west. It's just a phase in the opposite phase. And I'm saying that because I'm going to bring this up later. When there's something to regard, now that's suddenly betness. Because alephnius is so ethereal, there's no way to regard it. Suddenly there's something to regard. Aha! I'm going to look at that. I'm going to argue with that. I'm going to reference myself with that. I can argue myself in terms of agreement or conflict, disagreement, protest. I can be parallel with it. I can be congruent with it. I can be disturbed by it and say, what? But now, see, it's an object of reference. Yesterday, I looked up the word receive. How do you say receive in Hebrew? The internet is very useful in some ways. I simply wrote in what's the word receive in Hebrew? And two words came up, and slightly different. One was kuf lamed tet, and the other one was, gosh, I can't remember. Was it kuf? Right here. Yeah, we'll get to it later. I've got it written some on the other page of this. Anyway, the point is it kuf bet resh, I think? It means contractor, or the one opposed to you that's arguing. It's a resistor in electricity. It means to argue, but it's also the word receive. Here, I think I just remember where I wrote it. Kuf bet lamed means accept, to accept, which is to receive, encounter, place opposite or parallel, corresponding, complain, in the face of, stand before as a battering ram, to assume the obligation at capacity. And then there's another word, it's not this word, I can't remember what it is. Maybe it's just the word kuf bet. I was looking at kuf bet lamed. I think it's just kuf bet. It's to have a hollow leg so that if you're an amputee, you could take the stump of your leg and stick it into the hollow leg. So that which is hollowed out in order to receive that which is inserted in. It's also a vaulted room. Step into a room, instead of a flat ceiling, it's got a pitched ceiling. That's the word to receive. And also kuf lamed tet, take in, to strike roots with. So that picture of going down to the very root of the matter and the whole, and to see the adar, the tree bearing the fruit. Well, and I got, again, playing around with English words so as not to be misleading, but to say the deity, the word Dios, well, that's Latin, Theos, that's Greek, and it's like, it's just not God. It's just for the sake of not pulling in certain words that make your mind all of a sudden jump on that train of thought and run with it. So in part of the way I speak, I'm trying to find unusual words in order to not allow that distortion, distraction, but to keep on the track of thought where we're aiming at with trying to get on the Hebrew train of thought. If I'm contemplating the divine, immaterial, unfathomable, infinite, eternal, omniscient, I can't. Because the way we're designed, we got to have that dot that our mind can encircle around, that proton that the electron of otherness can wrap around and look at and argue with and rationalize with, accept, receive, parallel, perpendicular. That's the way we're built. That's the way the universe is built. So that's a betness compared to the alephnius. But see, if I say, well, bet means house and aleph means ox, it's like, What do you do with that? If I was just to say, ponder the aleph bet, ponder the aleph and the bet, or ponder the 22 letters of the alphabet, or ponder if aleph is deity, Elohim, infiniteness, and bet is house, which is like a body, which is like the container that the dot lives in, the bull lives in the pen, the idea lives within the concept, the specific is within the non-specific infinite. Ponder that. It's like, well, I just did, didn't I? How much further can I go? I don't even know how much further I can go. What does that mean? Where do I go? Go anywhere. What do you mean go anywhere? How do you think? Where's all this stuff coming from? If somebody were to say to you, hey, let's talk about Yahweh. Okay. Where do you start? Where do you go? What do you mean talk about him? Well, in Deuteronomy, he said, Deuteronomy 6, he said, you will speak of these things when you lay down and when you rise up, when you sit in your house, when you walk on the way. You personally will speak of these things, and you will speak of them, teaching them to your children. And you will write them between your eyes and on your arms. It's like, okay, well, that's a command. That's something he said to do. And it's like, no, let's think about that a little closer. When you lie down, where's your consciousness? Well, it's in your head. That's the dot inside the circle. See, when I get up in the morning, now my consciousness, instead of just being in my head because my body's dormant, now my body's moving and, oh, I got to turn on the toaster. I got to turn on the light. I got to walk from here to there. And now the circle around the dot of consciousness is expanded to be within the house. And if I'm in the house, sitting in the house, that's the circle. But when I'm walking on the way, now the circle's gotten bigger. It's within my field of view. It's my neighborhood. It's my country. It's my planet. You will speak of these things. Yourself, there's the dot inside the small circle of my own hopes, dreams, desires, thoughts, affections, and teach them to your children. Woo, that's suddenly expanding to a whole nother generation. Like one of those blackberries that's rooted here, and then it reaches out, and wherever it touches the ground, now it's going to root there, and then it's going to reach out, and now it's going to root there. See, he's describing the way the planet's built and the way we live on the planet. But if you think you're just looking at that verse in Deuteronomy and thou shalt think of these matters, and you will teach these matters, and you'll think of them when you lay down and you rise up. If you just read it as English words, you miss this whole other thing. And when you see it as this whole other thing, like the dot inside the circle, the bet compared to the aleph, suddenly you're realizing, oh, there's a very specific strategy. When he built the universe, built human consciousness, he must have had all this in mind because it all fits the concept of the fractal pattern. What's going on in my consciousness, my awareness of who am I in the middle of this infinite space, infinite time, but he's given us this space and this time. But compared to him, there's this infinite. So our earth realm life being is the dot within the infinite potential, the singular universe with inside the possible, who knows, multiverse. Oh man, that gets into quantum physics and all this other new age wacko woo-woo Hindu Buddhist. Oh, where does it go? I don't need to know where it goes. If I'm aware of the dot, how big is that circle? It's a playground. Just play in the sandbox right now. You can later go play in the jungle gym and the baseball field and maybe even go for a walk further, but it's okay to play in the sandbox. How long? As long as you want. Right now. See, all we really have is now. What I did in the past, that's a memory that exists in my now. I can put it on the shelf, but if I pull it off the shelf and contemplate it, then the memory of now is because I've made it now. And if I have a hope or an aspiration of the future, that's on another shelf, but I don't even think about it. I'm not even aware it exists until I bring it in, make it now. All I ever experience is now. Well, that's like the dot of Ehie. So the dot of Ehie is not just a way of describing a physicality, a location, a graphic. It's also the present consciousness. If he, the Almighty, the creator, the deity, the spirit, the essence, the whatever, see, if I can't find the English word that's suitable, that's fit, I got to keep finding another one, because anyone I choose as being the dot isn't sufficient or isn't accurate, because I'm looking for a bet to describe the Aleph. Can't be done. Unless at some point I say, look, we got to move on. So just give it something, give it a dot and let's move. Okay. Ehye. I exist. I am. Now, where do we go from there? Well, we've got 22 letters to deal with, man. The Alephness is the existing, for now, with the present consciousness of now, of I am. I exist. I am a consciousness trapped within a body, placed within a space and time, which maybe came from infinite. I don't remember. I wasn't given a memory of what came before this. All I know is, at least the day that I was born and I took my first breath, oh, they say I had pre-existed. I was conceived 9 months earlier. Okay. Where was I before that? I don't know. I've heard people say there is a pre-incarnation. I've heard people say they came from a realm and, hey, I'd like to walk the face of the earth and engage this challenge. Okay, well, then you'll be born to this couple now, here, Bush and all, where they come from. And nobody knows. Everybody has ideas. I was just reading something the other day. Somebody sent this article to me. They said it was it might have been Emperor Justinian, Roman emperor, I think it was about 400 AD or something. He decided, okay, that's it. No more talk of reincarnation, in that you came from some pre-existent state. Christianity, as the Roman Empire's official religion, will not tolerate, will not allow anybody to think or mention the word reincarnation or the concept. It is hereby, as of this moment, dismembered from Christian ideology. Yeah, but no yeah buts. Don't do it. Don't mention it. Don't talk about it. Don't even think about it. And here we are 2,000 years later. It's like reincarnation is some Buddhist New Age wacko. It has nothing to do with Christianity. Why? The emperor told us so. Is it true? Why did he have to make a decree? Because a bunch of Christians were contemplating it, thinking about it, and trying to wrap their mind about how it fits into the asher. That which is valid, true, authentic, verifiable. And one Roman emperor, because of all the squabble and conflict, said, no more, ever again. No one is allowed to engage that thought. We're going to cut the bull out of the pen. There's nothing that lives in the pen anymore. There's zeroness inside that circle. No pupil in the eye, blind eye. Was there supposed to be? Nobody knows, because we haven't been allowed to think that for a couple 1,000 years. And I'm not suggesting that we should, or I will, or I should. I'm not suggesting that I should contemplate that concept of reincarnation, because I don't even care. I don't even care. All I have is now. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter to me, did we pre-exist and choose to walk the face of the earth? And therefore, it also doesn't much matter whether after right now, there's going to be a rapture, or there's going to be living in the by and by in the kingdom of heaven on earth or not on earth. How does that work? The New Jerusalem, is that going to be hovering over the planet? Is it going to be resting on the planet? Is the planet going to be gone? Is the New Jerusalem going to be the new? I don't know, and I don't care. I've had to determine for myself that doesn't matter, because the only I exists as me right now having present thoughts. And so therefore I can think, I am the same eternal being right now as that I would have been back then, as I will be in the future. And the only thing that matters is Ehie, Asher, Ehie. Well, that's him. That's the deity, the dot, line, dot. And it's like, no, I'm the other dot. Not no, but as well as that, I'm the other dot. Ehie, Asher, Ehie. Yeshua said, I only say the things I hear my Father saying. I only do the things I see my Father doing. So if Yeshua hears his Father saying, I am Aleph Tav, then Yeshua can say, I am Aleph Tav. Well, then that means I can say I am Aleph Tav. Unless I'm not. Why would I be not? If I notice a discrepancy in what it means compared to what I say and what I think I'm saying, what I should be saying, well, wait a minute. If the ideal is to be the betness of the Alephness, if the ideal is to be the dot within the circle of what's allowed, prescribed, authentic, validated, hey, the Asher, to be the dot of Ehie within the Asher, in this case, a circle line and not a straight line, then it's okay for me to say, I want to be just like my Father is. I want to say the things which are true, right, valid, because everything he says is true, right, valid. So if he speaks Hebrew, I'm going to learn Hebrew. If he says something is up, okay, it's up. If he says don't do this, okay, don't do this. Somebody says, hey, what's up? It's like whatever he said is up. Well, do you know what he said? I'm not going to keep deferring whatever he said, whatever he said, whatever he said, because Yeshua said, I'm saying what he said. Well, then I can do that too. Because remember, Garden of Gethsemane, Yeshua, John chapter 17, he's praying and he says, me and you, Father, are echad, or one, and I'm praying that they would be one. Not that we're going to be God, to use those words, but we can have that same frame of mind. It's the same frame of reference. Well, if that's the case, how do I have that? Well, if the full scope, the circle, is the Aleph Tav, then my consciousness, the dot within the circle, the bowl within the pen, the Alephness, consciousness of self-realization, of self-awareness, self-actualization within the Aleph Tav. If the Aleph Tav is the full scope, because anything beyond the Aleph Tav, which is infinite, incomprehensible, unutterable, can't be expressed, at least is expressed by the Aleph Tav. That's what he gave us. So for me to look at John 1:1 and say, in the beginning made this word, that word is the Aleph Tav, which became the circle upon which, within which all else exists. So if I can look at the ayin, if I can look at the concept of that circle, the Alephness, the circle is the Aleph Tav. Within the Aleph Tav is all my existence, which is describable, which is then the betness. My Alephness of ethereal consciousness is identifiable, and then I can talk about it and use words which are betness, and that betness gimmels, like if you see this, what they call a plasma ball, you'll see a center sphere within a glass, and then there's these arcs of plasma arc, flame, electrical discharge connecting the outer to the inner. That's the gimmel. The gimmel is those sparks where the consciousness within this zone of the Aleph Tav, you might want to look at one of those plasma ball gizmo gadgets and say, hey, that's a model of this other thing. Now, I'd never thought that before until this exact moment, but as soon as I'm trying to wrap my mind around his stuff, and then I say, hey, it looks just like that in real life. There's a model of it. How about that? How about that? That's thinking about his stuff. How did we get there? Got to take a break here. But if somebody were to say, hey, let's talk about Yahweh stuff, it's like, okay, you go first. Where do you start? Let's take a break, and I'll come right back, and we'll pick up from there.